Do you mean me today?
It's a very important meeting.
No, it's fine. I know. Right, just take a pill. Yeah.
Okay, colleagues, we're on item 12. Welcome back. NHS staff survey. Chief People back.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll take the paper of bread and just highlight some of the
You okay, Sarah?
Yeah, sorry.
key issues. Thank you. So firstly, the board received I think a high level update pre-embargo in respect of the staff survey results. So to confirm that the published validated results didn't differ significantly from that update. And confirm that we've seen improvements made in 90 of 100 questions asked. So a really significant achievement there. We did, however, note that we are below the national average in relation to advocacy questions. And I'll come back to that in just a moment. Thanks. So what we've done this year is we've adopted a consistent model across the organisation. So each of the care groups and corporate services are working to a PDSA cycle around the staff survey results. So we're able to have oversight of that and monitor that, how that's progressing. So 4 out of the 5 care groups have their own specific staff survey action plans, and there is some detail of what those priorities are in the report. But just to pick up on the point that Karen mentioned earlier from the People Committee update, the WACS care group have incorporated their staff survey action plan into the already existing cultural improvement action plan so that the results are viewed together and action taken collectively. At the moment, we're currently drafting our new people strategy, and that's as a result of a number of feedback sessions with colleagues. And for those engagement sessions, we use the pillars of the people plan. So while we're drafting the strategy at the moment, we're taking the staff survey results in relation to those pillars alongside the engagement feedbacks that we received. So we're working on that at the moment, and that will come through to People Committee and to look. And then finally, one thing, as part of the people services transformation, we've introduced a new body practitioner role, and their focus is specifically around engagement. So this year we have that dedicated resource to support our care groups and to work with the comms team around how we engage around our results. And what I wanted to do was just mention paras 9 to 12 and then 25 particularly, please. So recognising that we are below the NHS average on some areas, such as raising concerns and confidence in that the organisation would address those concerns, and advocacy featured in this area as well. So although we have seen an increase in the scores from last year, there is still some work to do around this sort of advocacy arena. On a positive note, we have seen a significant increase in the line management questions of between 3 and 4%, which you mentioned there. We attribute to the really focused work that's happened across the organisation and across different colleague groups over the last 12 months. And then we've highlighted in the report the positives and some of the areas to focus on from our RES and DES indicator questions. And just want to draw particular attention to paragraph 11. And our achievement of a race disparity to 0. That's a significant milestone for us and want to know. Thank you. In terms of our WDES questions, highlighted that we have got some work there to do with our colleague network to understand what those experiences are and how we can do some more focused work to improve that lived experience of colleagues at work. And then finally, just come back to the point on advocacy in paragraph 25. So as I say, we've identified that the colleague responses in respect of the questions around advocacy. So great place to work, great place to be cared for. We do need to do some more focused activity. So the OD team have set up some additional conversations where we can reach out to colleagues to really understand what informed those results so that we can undertake some more targeted activity. And that was all I was going to focus on today, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take any questions?
Questions? Comments? Sarah?
Thank you. Thanks for the update, Rebecca. I noticed that it discusses the different care groups have their own action plans, which seems appropriate because obviously they've got results for their care group. I just wondered if you have a piece of work where you draw together the common themes from those action plans and whether there are any overarching themes that as a board we might want to just be a bit more aware of so we can look for assurance around.
Yes, we will. Thank you. So as part of the work I mentioned to create the new people strategy, we'll be looking at that in people services to say what are the corporate themes, if you will, that are common across care groups and coming out for the organisation, and making sure that we feed those into the actions that are identified and the themes for the people strategy. So that will come back up to this form.
Okay, thank you.
Similar line of questioning, I think, when that piece of work was presented at the people committee, very similar to the BT conversation, which is that cause and effect narrative. Is on reflection, I think what we've done in the past to good effect actually in some areas is we've taken quite a broad approach to improvement across a number of thematic areas. So I quite like the shift into that very specific care group focused or corporate focused. But for me, the advocacy questions, there will need to be some corporate consideration about, you know, if we want as many of our colleagues as possible to recognise this as a great place to work, I think there's some things that I would like to see feature in there just from my own lived experience. So I'd be grateful to see an early draft just to contribute to that before it goes.
And colleagues, just for governance purposes, we're asked to receive assurance that the National Staff Survey results are organisationally understood and that activities begun at a corporate and care group level to identify key priorities and embed underlying activity. With your permission, I'd like to score out the word assurance and that we just know. We know that the National Staff Survey are organisation, because we haven't got enough information for us to have assurance that if we stopped a member of staff in the corridor, they would understand the staff survey. So it's just just for the governance purposes, we're not seeking assurance here. The report clearly states, Becky, that it's gone out to all the care teams, they've got the results, and that now they're putting plans together on how they can embed the underlying activity in the next year, which is, I think, what people have alluded to, and that will go to the people committee. Are you comfortable with that? Yeah. Colleagues? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Rebecca. I called you Becky, so I know. Okay. Okay, happy to accept the paper? Yeah, Karen, just before we say yes.
Sorry to be late with this. I'm just thinking about the results of the survey and the advocacy work, and then the triangulation that's gone on and the work planned with the Freedom to Speak Up team. And this is potentially a request for a future report. Is there's just a potential sense here of when people do want to speak up or raise concern, going to quite a high point of escalation first. So looking to the Freedom to Speak Up guardians and actually I think some assurance or further explanation of the work that's going on that is enabling people to comfortably raise and have responses to their concerns at a lower level in the organisation without necessarily feeling it needs to escalate straight Freedom to Speak Up first. Would be really helpful, and it's a really important cultural indicator.
Do you think so?
I think I understand the principle of encouraging colleagues to resolve issues as quickly as possible and as informally as possible, because that's the right culture to develop. I'm just cautious and mindful of the view of the Freedom to Speak Up as a hierarchical escalation. We've been really cautious with colleagues to say, we've got lots of platforms to raise concerns and all of them are open and available.
Yes.
It's not that if you haven't heard something here, go to this one next. So I'd be mindful of introducing a don't go to Freedom to Speak Up until you've had it tried to be resolved elsewhere. Because that's what I heard a little bit on the don't go up. That's the words or the hierarchy. What we're trying to say is, look, there will be myriads of opportunities to get your issues heard, and they will get to the right place.
Yeah.
Particularly with Free to Speak Up, because we've got the app, people do it out of hours, they do it in the moment, so I'd be keen to still encourage colleagues to use Free to Speak Up just as any other opportunity, whether it's your line manager or anyone in the corridor. Just be mindful of that as we do the work.
Yeah, absolutely understood. I think I probably didn't articulate that as well as I might have, but yeah, absolutely.
Based on that, then, are we happy to accept that survey report?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we're moving on to item 13. It's in two parts. Provide a collaborative update, a report from the chief exec, and then a presentation from Sharon Robson on the One LSC. But I'm going to ask Aaron to do the introduction and take us through the both items.
Thank you, Chair. So just from a general update on the provider collaborative, I would have spent a bit of time on One LSC, which I won't steal Sharon's thunder. Colleagues around this table know I'm quite good at doing that when I report and then take away the key messages that people want to make. So I won't do that. Scott's nodding vigorously. And I would just mention that we do have a board to board. So all boards from the provider collaborative are coming together next week with Chris Ham facilitating. I'm really keen 8 months into the role now as the lead CEO for the PCB to take stock of where we are, think about what the collaborative is about and whether it's achieving what we would like, and some opportunity to think again about its future and where we're taking that for, I guess, all the challenges that we're facing. So that was the only update, is to make sure that we're prepped. We read any materials, that if there's any questions come to me or the chair before that. It's important that we come together on the 9th with a good opportunity to help shape the future of the collaborative. The second part of the agenda is around One LSC. I'm delighted Sharon, as the new managing director, recently appointed of One LSC, and starting to build your leadership team, which I'm sure you'll say a little bit about. So I'm going to hand over to Sharon, who's going to give us a quick update on One LSC, next steps, and making sure the board remains engaged in this really important collaborative programme. So Sharon, you're very welcome. Over to you.
Before you start, Sharon, just again for the minutes, so we're clear. Are we people happy to accept the written update report from the PCB that's in our pack?
Yeah.
We know the report. Thank you. And over to you.
Thank you. So good morning, everyone in person and on the screen. I'm Sharon Robson, recently appointed Managing Director of One LSC. I was previously Director of Procurement for the Lancashire Procurement Cluster, which was a shared procurement service for the 3 acute trusts in Lancashire. But we worked incredibly closely with Jim, who I'm sure you all know, at Morecambe Bay, and Steve over at Lancashire and South Cumbria. So I've got some lived experience in terms of shared services within the NHS, and specifically within Lancashire and South Cumbria. So when this opportunity arose, I was absolutely passionate about going for the job, because I nobbled Aaron at least twice in terms of some sort of due diligence before the role. But I'm really, really passionate about this particular role. So One LSC provides us with an opportunity to bring together all of our corporate services across the whole of Lancashire and South Cumbria. It's created by the NHS, for the NHS, and for all of our communities within Lancashire and South Cumbria. It's co-owned by the 5 trusts, it's co-managed and also co-directed. And ultimately, we are all responsible for One LSC in terms of making sure that we are held to account, but also that we absolutely own our trusts. In terms of where we want to go, as I said, I'm really passionate about One LSC, and why wouldn't we be? We're all consumers of the NHS. It's ourselves, our families, and indeed our friends and communities. And I'm sure we all share the vision that we want to create excellent healthcare services with equitable access across the whole of Lancashire and South Cumbria. How could One LSC help trusts to do that? Well, that's by allowing you guys to focus on quality of care, because One LSC provides excellent corporate services for your clinical teams and indeed, ultimately, our patients. I think One LSC gives us a fabulous opportunity to improve performance, but also to reduce costs in a sustainable manner moving forwards. So what can we offer? What is the plan? Clearly, in terms of One LSC, we need to improve resilience within some of our corporate services, and we need to be thinking about being fit for the future. We're already in the 21st century, but we know that we've got a lot of duplication across our system. So we will be working to remove unwarranted variation across our corporate services. And how does that impact on clinical care? Well, we end up with technology solutions that don't talk to each other between trusts. So if we think about our patient journeys when they're transferring from one provider to the next, our systems might not talk to each other. We also have different contractual arrangements. Again, that is for us to remove those barriers in terms of unwarranted variation. And in order to do all of those things, we will actually be capturing a huge amount of data from across all 5 trusts. And we can begin to use that data much more intelligently in terms of data insights to help us really create some transformational opportunities to work with, both in terms of corporate services, but also in terms of new opportunities for clinical teams. But within all of that, we can't do any of it unless we get the culture right. So creating the right culture for our corporate services is absolutely fundamental. When you talk to corporate colleagues, I cannot tell you how passionate they are about patient care and how they really come to work with the basis that today I'm going to do something for our patients. And I think it's absolutely essential that we continue to create an environment in which our corporate colleagues can flourish and they can really see their contribution to patient care. But within that, we've also got to be making sure that it's an inclusive culture and everyone feels that they have a voice. And one of the messages that I'm trying to get across is come and talk to us and help us shape the future for all of our health provision across the whole of Lancashire and South Cumbria. So in thinking about culture and risks and the way in which we articulate the risks for this particular programme, could we just move to the next slide, please? Thank you. Thank you very much. So in terms of navigating those risks, we need to think about the risks in these 5 core areas that we've identified, but also the risks against potential rewards. And I think across the NHS, you know, there are many colleagues who would rather leave things the same, but actually we have to move forwards and we have to engage those colleagues in helping us identify those risks, because the risks that they see and perceive are real, and we need to listen to those and help us to create truly diverse mitigations for all of those risks. The more risks that we listen to, the more we can address the situation in terms of a successful organisation moving forwards. Could I have the next slide, please? So when I was thinking about creating the conditions for success for the new organisation, I was thinking about the trusts and One LSC in that yin and yang environment. Governance is the absolute core, making sure that we are held to account in terms of our performance from One LSC to trusts, but similarly trusts to One LSC in terms of that joint relationship. And when we think about how we create those conditions for success and that relationship, so forgive me, Aaron, you've already heard this. What I said at interview was, if I am successful, I will treat One LSC like my baby. I will cherish it, I will nurture it, but I will also challenge it, and I will make sure I create the conditions whereby it reaches its full potential. But I expect trusts to do the same too. I expect trust boards to create the leadership and people throughout the trust to feel that they are very much part of the success. So we have a true vision of shared success and what that looks like. And from our lived experience, that is an area which has been problematic in the past, shall we say. We need to make sure that when One LSC is created, it's not a them and us. We are still part of the whole. Okay, next slide. Finish there. Any questions?
Hey colleagues, so this is the introduction really to the One LSC framework. I think the questions the board will seek, Sharon, you may not be prepared to answer it yet, is when do we get the due diligence report about benefits, deadlines, moving forward, staff engagement, etc. So I think we take it that you may not be in a position to answer some of the questions. We're aware of that, but I'll open the floor up. Sarah?
Thank you. It's probably in the same vein, actually. But Sharon, thank you for the introduction. I'm Sarah Rees. I'm one of the non-executive directors. So it's really great to hear you bring those infographics to life. Actually, that made a lot of sense. My question, you talked about governance being that golden thread through the middle. And I don't know if you're in a position to talk to any of that at the moment, but one of the things I'd be really interested to hear more about is how that governance might work to ensure that alignment.
So the governance, if you think about the PCB Joint Committee, ultimately that is where the control resides in terms of direction and management. At the moment, that is delegated down to the CSEC, which is the Central Services Executive Subcommittee. And what we will have is we will have for each of the corporate functions, each of the 5 corporate functions, we will have a professional tower, which is effectively the contract management team, but that is populated by all 5 trusts, both from the trust side and then one LSC, so that they can come together to agree in terms of the performance and the baselining, and indeed what the key performance indicators and reporting mechanisms are going forwards. They can report through the CSEC to that collaborative executive committee in terms of holding one LSC to account. There is a shared collaboration, a strategic collaboration agreement, which sits behind all of this, which embeds the legalities for that. And we're hoping to bring that to trust boards in June.
I've noted that as well.
Yeah, it's that. So Sharon's already doing some great work in engagement and creating, I guess, this kind of narrative around one LSC. Behind the scenes, as we talk, I'm not going to keep using the baby analogy, but as one LSC moves to kind of full term and being born, hopefully around September, October, there are some key governance steps that the board will have oversight of. So the strategic collaboration agreement is the main one that will explain the governance, the way that the business will be managed, risks are shared, the financial framework. So that will be the core document, and Paul with the company secretary's legal advice are getting that into the right shape. CSEC is obviously, and I chair the executive committee to make sure that each board gets the opportunity to look through that properly and commit to that. But we've also got the hosting arrangement with the LHT subject to NHS England approval. And then we've got some other pieces of work that need to be done early this quarter, the benefit statements for cost release and productivity. So there's a basket of goods now that I think boards will get more specifically cited on over this quarter, way ahead of the September, October launch of the one LSC model. Ali Bolson is our executive lead. She represents us on the executive committee. I don't represent us in that space. I'm chairing the system piece of work. So we'll make sure that probably through the people committee, as we come through that process, it'll come through to board chair over that next few months in the way that Sharon's articulating.
Thank you, that's really helpful.
Lovely.
Yeah, I'm Tony, one of the NEDs, Tony Oakman. Thank you for that. Brilliant, really clear. I think I heard one of the things you talked about is a kind of harmonisation, because obviously everyone's not going to be starting from the same position. So it'd be really helpful just to kind of get a sense, and it's early days yet, what's methodology, what's the approach to that? Because some parts might be gold standards, others might be, should we say, bronze, depending on what the issue is. And obviously there's always this kind of harmonisation means change, doesn't it?
Yes,
So
it does.
just talk to us about how you think that may work going forward, Sharon.
Okay, so at the moment, I've got 3 of my 5 directors in post, and not all of them have quite started yet, but you
Yeah.
can imagine they're in the space of thinking. So their brief is, we need a baselining piece. We need to understand precisely what is happening now within trusts, because when we move across, what we have to work towards is that the trusts don't see any deterioration in service levels. But to actually do that, we need to understand what those service levels are. And you're exactly right, it's different in different trusts. And we will have different service levels in terms of what you receive as a trust, but we'll also have a different budget funding proposition, potentially. We'll have different headcount. So that baselining will incorporate all of those different elements, so we can bring the 5 together and say, okay, this is where we are at the moment. The plan is to transfer as is and transform on the other side of the TUPE arrangements. So what we've said is in year 1, it's a steady state in terms of understanding those services and agreeing with those core leads and indeed the trusts what good looks like across the system. So that is the baselining piece. A big part of that is obviously the financial piece. So all of our DOFs are working proactively in terms of a financial framework to underpin all of that in terms of how benefits and costs are managed between system partners. At the moment, they've developed that work in terms of a set of core principles, and they're making comparisons in terms of the corporate returns in terms of budgets, but they need to triangulate that with the actual budgets too. So that work is ongoing. But fundamentally, on the other side of transfer, which is where the transformation will happen, those service leads and the services and the leaders and managers within existing trusts will help to create that new targeting operating model for each of the corporate functions.
Thank you.
I think, Tony, your specific question, I think, is about potential deterioration and what decision you make around what transformational outcomes look like. So if I use a live example, you know, occupational health in One Trust in particular is orders of magnitude more expensive than others, but has an orders of magnitude bigger impact on attendance and sickness absence and premium pay reductions. So it cannot be that we run to the lowest common denominator of cost as a model. There's going to have to be a business case gateway approach on return on investment, cost controls, and what good looks like. So there'll be quite a lot of scrutiny in that transformation piece and quite a lot of pressure, I think, about, well, if X can do it at X per head, we now need to move to that model. Very clearly, we still need to maintain safe standards and release cost. And I think with Sharon's leadership, this view of using AI, using innovation, using technology, using automation, and some good vacancy control is likely to be one of the main factors of what we do in this space. But the board, I would expect, Chair, will be looking for reassurance and assurance around minimum standards, satisfactory delivery, and cost release, where we can't all get to platinum level of service, because that's, frankly, we're at £200 million overspend in our system, and we can't afford to do that.
That's helpful.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that, Sharon. I'm Karen Deeney, another of the non-execs. So this is clearly, I think it's very exciting, really, really positive, but also quite new in some way, new for us. And I'm just wondering what learning there might be out there in other public sector systems or other systems that can really inform some of this, so that in effect we make the best of what other people have already learned and don't reinvent the same mistakes. Is that being used to really inform direction of travel?
So one of the things that I'm wanting the directors to do is start looking at benchmarking, particularly as we plan the transformation piece, and we need to start thinking about the transformation now. So one of the statements that I've made to the team is, I don't want us to benchmark the NHS, because quite frankly, for some of our corporate services, the NHS is not the best in the marketplace. So we need to raise our aspirations above the current thresholds. One of the things I was thinking about, we've got some really big employers across our region. Actually, let's go and talk to them. Let's go and meet up with the Director of Procurement who works for BAE Systems, and let's understand what he does in terms of his transactional. How do we get ourselves in a position where we can really aim much, much higher? When I started with the LPC, that was something that I did on logistics, because I've worked in manufacturing all of my life before the public sector. And I know that in terms of logistics within the NHS, we were at a place where I was in my career in the 1980s, really. So that's exactly what we've done. And we've now got a logistics strategy and a systems strategy, which actually Morecambe Bay have just approved a business case. We started that 5 years ago. We've now got that consideration. So in terms of that benchmarking, as far as I'm concerned, we want to be the best in the marketplace, not just the NHS. And it's going out there and doing just that. From a personal perspective, I ran a shared service for the 3 acute trusts, but prior to that, I ran a shared procurement service for 3 of the Greater Manchester local authorities. So that was Stockport, Trafford and Rochdale. So I've got some learning there in terms of place and some of our partnerships.
Okay,
Thank
I'll
you.
go Alison and then Sackley. Ali, please.
Thank you.
On
I
mute.
was just,
Okay, you're all right now.
am I all right now? It's a little bit slow, the connection, I think. I was just wondering how we're protecting, safeguarding, assuring the staff that will go into the shared services. It's great to know that you've got experience of running shared services, but I'm sure there will be some nervousness amongst those staff that are currently employed in the independent organisations, and how we're going to enable them to navigate the transition smoothly, safely and hopefully happily. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison. You're exactly right. So up to the point at which I was recruited, a lot of the communications were from executive leadership teams, and I think those video sessions were really well received. But we've got also a lot of electronic communications via the engagement hub. And just to give a feel for that engagement hub, we're looking at potentially 4,000 people in scope, and already 1,700 people have actually logged on to that website, and it's regularly used, and it's something you have to physically log on to. So I think electronically we're doing well. However, that absolutely is not the whole story. So it's about personal contact with our teams. I'm already visiting teams now. So last week I was in Morecambe Bay. I met with the estates team and the IT team. Fabulous meetings, talking to the help desk, really getting to know people. I'm doing that on an ad hoc basis at the moment, Alison, where people have asked me to come and join. But what we're also doing is a programme of road shows whereby I will come to each of the trusts and we will actually book a venue where people can come in and literally be involved in a discussion. And it will be a discussion because I'll be using things like technical tools like Sligo, where we can basically ask some core questions and ask them to contribute their answers, and we can see the answers behind it. So the sorts of things I've used in the past is, what would you like our customers to be saying about us? What would you like our culture to be? So they actually feel engaged in those sessions. So yes, big plans in terms of communications, but I think the fact that I've now got 3 of my 5 directors means that we can spread those messages a little bit further as well.
I'm conscious of the time, so I'll take the last point on this item from Sackvey. Sackvey, please.
Thank you, Chair. Sharon, thanks. I remember all the good work you did through the COVID pandemic, so I'm sure this will be fantastic as well. It's quite refreshing to hear that shared vision about One LSC, especially the focus on outcomes and inequalities and that sort of levelling up and not going, levelling down. But I just wanted to highlight, context is king here, especially in our context, and there is a parallel that we've experienced with CCGs coming together and all that learning that we've had. So I'm sure we can draw from all of that in terms of the race to the bottom and, context again, resources being constrained. But I was just highlighting a couple of points. One is the public narrative. I think people are desperate outside of the NHS to hear about this, when it's time, especially in terms of leveraging the wider benefits that this will likely bring to our local economy and into the local marketplace, like you were saying, Sharon. So I just welcome a discussion when it's ready, when the timing is ready, with wider partners outside of the NHS. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sackvey. Take those as observations, if that's all right, Sharon. Colleagues, are we happy to accept the update? Yes. Yeah, and no doubt we'll see you again on the board. Sharon, thank you. I'm sure you're quite comfortable if colleagues want to contact you outside the board and explore this in detail, etc. So please do so, colleagues, if you wish to. Sharon, thank you.
Well done. Thank you.
Move on then, colleagues, item 14, the Quality Governance and Accountability Framework update. You'll see in your papers that it's gone through audit, it's gone through finance and performance, it's gone through the people and the quality committee. So I'm going to ask the Chief Nursing Officer to open it and introduce us to Sarah, I assume.
Thank you, Chair. That's going to be very.
It's not been through committee. No, just to clarify.
I've got it here, 22nd of April. Interesting. Right, well, we'll scrub that to make sure the minutes are correct. We'll scrub that and just take those out of the presentation. I hope you got that, Nicola, please. When we go to this paper 14, if we can just take out the items on prior discussions and which committees it's gone to, then we're clear. Okay.
Will do, Chair, thanks.
Thank you.
Mike, I think just to kind of clarify, there is no covering report for this paper, if I recall. It's a presentation, Mike. So I think you've just conflated this with the terms of reference item. Just so the people are clear.
Okay, just the reference schedules.
Yeah, so there is no attachment for item 14.
My apologies, colleagues.
Item 15.
To item 15.
The look of horror on Sarah's face. No,
not as bad as the look of horror on mine. Right, let's just be clear then in minutes then. Nicola, my apologies, ignore what I've said. We're on item 14, it's a verbal update. Leave the documents as they are for item 15, thank you.
Will do. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Have a third go.
Oh, thanks, Sarah. To take us through that, because, yeah.
Sarah, please.
Okay, so what you'll know is that during RSP and beyond, we looked at our BAF, our PAF and our QGAF. And for those of you who aren't as embroiled in what those mean, we looked at our board assurance framework, our performance accountability framework and our quality governance and assurance framework. And one of the things we said as we exited RSP was we've put these accountability frameworks and assurance frameworks in place, but at the moment, they don't talk to each other as elegantly as we would like them to. And therefore, I was tasked with saying, how can we integrate our performance accountability framework, our board assurance framework, and our quality governance and assurance framework? So this is our governance processes as suggested by me on one slide. So it's as simple as I can get it. The blue circles are meetings, the yellow circles are data feeds, and the red circles are specifically for Sarah, who wanted me to know where the points of escalation were up and down. So I'm going to stand at the, because I think it's easier. So if you look in the left-hand corner, you've got the care group and corporate board meetings. The care groups and corporate board meetings, what we know we've heard from our care groups is they would like to be able to deliver their services and then let us know when they need help, and they want that greater autonomy to act. So the care group and corporate board meetings and the minutes sit there. What they then do is produce at the end of those meetings a sheet which will have, these are what we're escalating, these are the emerging issues, these are the emerging risks, and then they will tell us where they're escalating those to. And they will then also be responsible for tracking the output of that escalation. So again, it deals with one of the CQC's long-term issues that's raised, that nothing is tracked in terms of what happens as a result of those escalations. So that they will sit within our corporate or our care group board meetings. Some of those escalations will go up to performance review meetings, and some of those will go across to the sub-assurance committee, so the tier 2, 3, 4 and 5, those committees that sit underneath quality, people, etc. And the ask of care groups or corporate teams is that they will say what they are looking for in sharing that information. So are they alerting somebody? Are they asking for action? Are they asking support? The performance review meeting, so this is where we oversee the path. There will be a sheet of paper, which again, an electronic document, which again says, we think these are the things that we cannot deal with, that we need additional support, that we are not comfortable holding. And they will then feed across to the board assurance committee. So each of the board assurance committees will know what has come out of the performance review meetings in terms of actions and escalations, risks and issues. The performance review meetings use the care group IPRs, which are reviewed at the Chloe meetings, and additional qualitative data from the people who sit in those, which then generate a list of Chloe's, which the executive chairs take the care groups or corporate functions through. I should mention that at the moment we haven't been doing corporate function performance review meetings, so that is something we are adding into this process. So there is that greater grip and control around the corporate functions as well as the care group functions. This data set here will then be used to feed across into the sub-board assurance committees. So this will be our single version of the truth for the care groups. So one of the things we've heard again is we've got multiple different data sets feeding across the processes. This is our single version of the truth, and it will feed into the sub-board assurance committee. That will, because we will have a data set which is mapped to the IPR, it will mean the care groups are not having to generate an abundance of different reports for all the different committees. They can instead say, this is the slide deck and this is our narrative to support the slide deck. And it will just be selected pieces of work from this IPR, which will feed across into our sub-board assurance committees. So it will reduce significantly the amount of reporting asking care groups. From these sub-board assurance committees, Chair's reports with action logs will feed up to the board assurance committees. Then this is again something that we're not currently doing that we think will give greater grip and control around what we're doing as an organisation. So the trust IPR and OPR, so the OPRs are what goes to the board assurance committees. The trust IPR will be reviewed at EDG, and an executive summary which is signed off by the executives will come up with the full trust IPR up to board. Those OPRs will also be seen in EDG, and EDG will be able to triangulate what's going on in the IPR with the output of the performance reviews. So what we've seen now is a build where we've linked the performance accountability framework in with the QGAF structure, and it's now starting to link across into the trust board and the board assurance framework. From the board assurance committees, we've then got chair's reports with action logs, which will feed up to trust board, which you will then be able to triangulate with the executive summary and the trust level IPR. So the idea is we've got different levels of data in our IPR, which will allow this function to be operational, this function to be assurance, and this function to be strategic. And it fully links across the board assurance framework, the path and the IPR. And what we are looking to develop is a operational standard operating policy, so we can tell people this is how we're going to operate it, and linking on with Paul's team when we think about what you guys are saying in terms of this is our risk matrix and this is what our risk appetite is for this, that can link in directly with what we're telling the care groups they need to escalate up. So we're saying if you've got a risk and it sits here, we'd expect you to be telling somebody. If you've got a risk and it sits here, we're happy for you to hold that yourself. Tabitha, can you just press my space bar, please? Perfect. So in addition, what we are looking, so obviously audit committee sits slightly to the side because it's not our assurance committee. I have not included, for simplicity's sake, the other statutory meetings which feed into board. I'm literally just looking at those which have an oversight and assurance function. Is we are suggesting transformation and improvement becomes a formal assurance committee, and we would look for support with a NED chair for that. So we would have clarity and granularity, for several reasons, not least that the successful delivery of that is absolutely fundamental to our successful financial planning moving forward. Additional information. So at the moment, we have quality assurance committee. So what I've looked at is enumerate papers identifying what our gaps are in the organisation, and also from a political point of view, what is coming up the horizon, as this is something we need to really consider and we have on our radar. So we'd keep infection prevention control, we'd keep safeguarding, health and safety, risk management, quality governance group, but I'm looking to add compliance and assurance committee. So what that would do is, for those of you who are at audit committee, there were several reports which we had moderate assurance on, and they're largely related to things which are external to the organisation coming in, and suggested we could have handled them in a tighter, more grippy way. They would be overseen by the compliance and assurance committee, so it will give us that real grip and control. And we know that politically and very sensibly, health equity is a major issue for us as an organisation and nationally. So we believe we need to have that separate committee reporting up into quality assurance committee. Thank you. What I've then done is, I know it's a bit of a nightmare, but I did this largely for the care groups, because I've shared this with the care groups to test how this would feel for them, because I thought I didn't want to bring it to board if the care group said, Sarah, that's absolutely awful. So sitting quality governance group, what you'll know is we have a patient safety and quality strategy which is due to be refreshed. Quality governance group is the group which oversees the full delivery of the patient safety and quality strategy. And basically, a lot of the business of the care groups can be mapped onto these committees. So what I've done is map what each of those committees do, so that if you are a care group board sitting thinking we've got an issue with VT, we need to escalate, you can literally flick to this chart and see which of these groups should I be escalating this across to, so that it works as a user manual for the organisation as well. So basically what I'm looking for today is, do people agree with this in principle? And then the next steps for us would be to refresh the QGAF, the path and write that operating policy, and we'll be looking to bring that across to the July board.
Okay, so we're asking to agree to this in principle. Comments? Tony?
Wonderful. I really enjoyed that. Because I think it makes a lot more sense in terms of that kind of governance, accountability and where to go type one. That's ticking the box. Number two, point about corporate was really important because that does seem to disappear. It's a fundamental key component of delivering success going forward. So it'll be interesting to see how that develops. And then the third element, I'm sure you've done this, which is the scenarios around, because risks aren't just within the trust, but all the emerging things, one ALSC. So presumably you kind of run that through this model and everything would have a home escalation.
And when you look at some of the other groups which aren't formal assurance committees, some of them sit outside here. So we've mapped it, but anything that people come up, because there will always be things I'm not aware of, we can then map them onto this.
And I have to say this would have been really helpful as a NED because it's just like, bloody hell, I can't get my head around it when I started. And now having that, it starts to kind of pull together. So it's, for me, it's a great piece of work.
Can you take that as a note for the board, if you don't mind, Tony, that if this is approved, that we use it as part of the induction for NEDs?
Yeah, it'd be great.
Okay, thank you. Scott?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, so as Sarah and Chris know, we kicked the tires on this a lot, and I really like it. Very supportive of it, especially as chairing the performance reviews. The one point I wanted to make, particularly for non-executive colleagues and committees, was that we will want to and need to be ever so careful on the difference between sharing of risk, intelligence and issues and escalation.
Yes.
And so you could get a year down the line in that and have an action tracker with 347 actions on it if everything's an escalation. So we need to be, I would suggest we demand of that structure that we will have sharing of intelligence and risk, but if it's escalation, that's something very different, which requires a loop to be closed, and we'll just need to be mindful of that.
Good point, Scott. Thank you. Aaron?
Just a couple of reflections. It's a really good piece of work, this, with a very complex question about that alignment. I think it's important to recognise Sarah's leadership in this has been great, but it reflects lots of people's contributions and lots of thought processes that have gone through testing some of this. So it's important that this is a connected piece of work across execs and others and care groups that have helped shape this. I had a particular line of inquiry over the last few weeks about one thing that we haven't mentioned here, which is the cadence of assurance, how often the assurance committees will meet, what they get fed by. And there is a recommendation to move Quality Committee and Finance Committee to every 2 months to align to the board reporting. I raised some significant concerns around worries on what that might mean for signals outside, SOF 2 progression, grip and control, and had a good conversation with the exec team on Tuesday and was reassured by what I heard in terms of the lines of inquiry being satisfied and the assurance being satisfied. But in particular, the chairs of the Quality Committee and Finance Committee, I'd want you to make sure that you get the same level of reassurance to give you that confidence. So when we come with the final report, the risks and issues of this and how they've been mitigated, so we can answer that question, Chair, are going to be really important for us to do publicly so we can see that. Because we're about to step again into that regulatory kind of arena, aren't we, on progression? And I don't want this to be the thing that says, oh, this is new and a bit unusual, we don't want you to do that. But I think there's a really good piece of work and answers a lot of questions that I think will push us on to SOF 2 and beyond. But I just want to make sure that's minuted here and we get it in July and colleagues get the chance to help kind of the soft version of it as well, Chair.
Yeah. Sarah?
Yeah, and I think I've had 2 conversations already actually with Sarah as part of the development of this, and hence the addition of those red circles. And that absolutely take your point, Scott, on escalation. But what I was saying is, as an assurance committee, what we can't have is just a feed of here are some stats, everything's looking all right, or this is the thing you should know about, because sometimes we need more detail to know what questions to ask. So that was something that Sarah and I were discussing, and also this point that when reports come through with alerts, we need to be really clear about what the actions are that are going to be taken to support that. So I am still a little bit on the fence about frequency of Quality Assurance Committee, and it's reflected, I think, in the size of the agendas and updates that we have. But what we've said is we'll continue to look at this and also potentially look at a review point as well, just to make sure that we can meet our regulatory and statutory responsibilities as a committee. But I am supportive of direction of travel and do feel engaged in that process.
Karen?
Thank you. Thanks, Sarah. It's fantastic to see this so clearly represented. Absolutely. And just a couple of points. Firstly, I just really wanted to say how supportive I am of having transformation and improvement, having that level of a kind of board subcommittee, because that, I mean, just from today's papers, that feels like it's something really important to have that kind of governance and assurance grip and reporting. And secondly, it speaks a little bit to frequency of meetings. And I think there is something in here for us to really try to begin to really understand and engage with. And it's, I guess it's the question, does frequency necessarily correlate with greater assurance? So I think there's a piece in here, there's a piece in here that's actually about, so what does continuous assurance look like? Because we need to know whether it's 1 month or 2 months, how do we have that assurance grip on what's happening every time for everybody? So I think if we can play that into ongoing review and evaluation of this, that would really bring some value. Thank you.
You don't have to respond. I think just take those as comments and observations. And there is no correlation between frequency and assurance, as you know. I recognise a rhetorical question, but it's really a deeper issue, which is, are we maturing as an organisation? Where are we from SOF 4 to SOF 3? Where are we in the direction towards good? And what Sarah and her colleagues have produced is that step towards a further maturation, really. Are we mature enough to accept that we don't need to drown in data? And where's the assurance and where's the headspace for strategic thinking? So I'm assuming from the responses, everybody's happy to accept it in principle.
Yes, Chair.
Sarah, thank you. See you soon, Sarah. Now, we will move now on to item 15, and this time I hope I get it right. Prior discussions have been held by a number of subcommittees, which are in your report there. We're asked to approve the Board of Assurance Committee terms of reference and matters delegated to committees and schedules of business 24-25. I'm assuming that all the committees there have recommended this proposal to the board. Anything to add, Company Secretary?
No, the only sort of point just to kind of reference in the report is the presentation from kind of Sarah, that when we bring that paper back in July, there might be some minor tweaks needed to the terms of reference, but it's important that we have terms of reference and schedule of business as we go into the year. So this is the recommendation that you've got, but I would just add that as a caveat.
Sarah?
Thank you. I missed the last audit committee, so I wasn't able to look at that directly. But I just wanted to raise the point about whistleblowing in the audit committee terms of reference. So it's a clear area that the audit committee focuses on in terms of being assured of the process to ensure that we have a good process in place. But that's not reflected in the work plan of the committee, and it's also not part of the next year's internal audit. So my question or ask is just how, as an audit committee, can we seek assurance in this coming year on process around whistleblowing, given it was also an area which was weaker in our staff survey.
But I'd suggest that if that's a proposal from Sarah, we'll include it in the programme, and I'll have a discussion with Tony about how we incorporate that into the schedule of business.
Okay. For the minutes, we're happy to support that proposal. Yep, thank you. Okay, colleagues, then we're happy to accept that and this item. Thank you. We'll move on then to item 16, policy and publication reports. Anything to bring to our attention? Okay, thank you. You've got the attendance monitoring. There's no urgent business being brought to our attention. Okay, just want to check. You're happy that we've covered everything this morning? You're not going to walk out the room and think you should have asked something or anything like that? Okay, then I will close the meeting at 12:22. Shall we reconvene then at 10 to 1? Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, colleagues. On Teams, colleagues, thank you.